From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Thursday in June. We are going to be using this podcast to discuss some revelations about the NFL and NFLPA's arbitration ruling in a collusion case from several years ago. We're also going to be looking ahead to the 2025 season and attempting to project the stats of one DeAndre Hopkins, place him among a group of former Ravens wide receivers. But first, Jonas, right before we went live on this podcast, we did get breaking news, and that is that the NFL has announced they are suspending former Ravens kicker Justin Tucker for the first 10 weeks of the 2025 regular season for violating the league's personal conduct policy. The suspension begins on roster cutdown day, which is August 26th, so he can play in preseason games if he is with a team. Now, remember, the Ravens did cut him back on May 5th. He will be eligible for reinstatement on Tuesday, November 11th, so missing several months of the regular season. And as with any free agent, Tucker may serve his suspension while not being under contract with a club. So he doesn't have to be under a team's control in order to serve his suspension. If he is signed during the offseason, he also may attend training camp and participate in preseason games. This is all happening because Tucker has been accused of inappropriate sexual behavior by 16 women at 8 different Baltimore area spas and wellness centers, as reported by the Baltimore Banner. He has continued to deny these allegations, and his representative, Rob Roach, today released a statement, and I will read it out here. Quote, "We are disappointed with the NFL's decision. Justin has always strived to carry himself in a way that would make his family and community proud. He stands by his previous statements. In order to put this difficult episode behind him and get back on the field as soon as possible, we have advised Justin to accept this resolution and close this matter. The people who know Justin best know his character and understand that while he remains fully committed to excellence as a football player, he is deeply dedicated to his most important lifetime roles as a father, husband, and friend," end quote. Jonas, 11 weeks, I should say, not games, suspension for Justin Tucker. That is an awfully long suspension, especially considering that the NFL prescribes a 6-game unpaid suspension for more serious violations in their personal conduct policy. 11 weeks, I should say, is almost double that.
Yeah, this is a pretty good indication of just what the NFL thinks of it. You know, the baseline for the more serious violation of the personal conduct policy are 6 games. So to go to 10 weeks, I think says that the NFL found what we thought they would find, because it's what our reporters found during this whole experience. And just looking at our newsroom Slack, we have Julie Sharper, who obviously was a main contributor to our coverage, and got a statement from the attorneys who are representing many of the massage therapists who accused Tucker of inappropriate behavior. And they said the NFL's investigation, quote, unequivocally validated the experiences told by each of the victims. So I think that probably says everything you need to know about just where the NFL and our reporting fell in terms of alignment. It could be a death knell for Justin Tucker's career. I don't know how many teams, certainly in the next couple of months, are going to be in the market for him with everything that it comes attached to him baggage wise. Maybe we'll see him show up later in the season when a team gets desperate or a playoff team needs a injury replacement or something. But certainly, I think Justin Tucker will be out of sight for the foreseeable future, especially with this suspension being as severe as it was.
Yeah, I mean, a suspension of a much shorter length is something that teams can often overlook when they're signing a free agent. I think about a very different set of circumstances with Jimmy Garoppolo, the quarterback who was suspended for the first 2 games of this past year, and he was signed back in March and by the Rams. They were very accepting of eating those 2 games and being okay with being without a player. One, Garoppolo is a backup quarterback, so you don't necessarily need him on the field. And 2 games is a much shorter amount of time to swallow. And if Justin Tucker is to accept what Rob Roach has recommended, which is he will not fight this decision and that he will take this matter and close it and take his 11-week suspension, that's an awfully long time for a team to wait for him. if they were to sign him from now until the start of the regular season, even if they get to see him during training camp and during the preseason. I think if Justin Tucker does play again in the NFL, it will likely come after the suspension ends, after he has been signed, after the suspension ends. I don't imagine a team would be willing to have a suspended kicker on their roster for that long. If they were to sign him in October, that's just a matter of weeks that they would have him underemploy until that suspension is over. So I would imagine that the door is still open for him to play in 2025 and beyond. But considering the struggles that he had during the 2024 season, those play a factor into this. And considering the fact that he won't be available to a team until the second week of November, that certainly goes against the likelihood that he'll play again in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the best thing about this suspension is that, like you said, it doesn't require him to be on a contract for that clock to start. So he can get it out of the way. But again, he is an aging kicker who is coming with a lot of baggage. Is coming off the worst season of his career. Would be re-entering the NFL at a fraught time for American politics, American society. Certainly a lot of guys would feel strongly about what he is accused of, and certainly a lot of front office folks would be not in favor of what he stands for at this point. And who knows? There may be other shoes to drop in all this that makes him even more toxic and to NFL front offices. It's again, just a pretty shocking, pretty sudden fall from grace from a guy who this time last year we were all expecting to be back on that Hall of Fame track, and he still might be considered a Hall of Fame worthy player by the time he hangs him up. But just not a lot to add behind the fact that this has all happened in span of 6 months thereabouts. It kind of got kicked off right after the season ended, and it really accelerated, and there were lulls and spasms of activity. But here we are, and I mean, I guess if you're the Ravens, you're maybe a little bit grateful for the timing of this, because you're not going to have anyone talking for the next 3 or 4 weeks. No one to ask about what exactly this means or what lessons are to be learned for this franchise or for any franchise about this fall from grace. But I guess that's how the NFL works.
Yeah. Remember, the Ravens cut Tucker back on May 5th for what they said was football decisions. And they are going with Tyler Loop, potentially a 6th-round pick, and they'll have him battle against another undrafted free agent rookie. So that position is going to be a position that we're going to watch closely this season. It's been almost 5 months exactly since our first report on the BaltimoreBanner.com about these allegations. So it's been a whirlwind 5 months. And the Ravens, I think, at this point are probably hoping to just put that behind them and move on. Any final thoughts that you have about this, Jonas, before we move on? For comparison's sake, I want to throw out that Deshaun Watson was suspended 11 games and fined $5 million in August of 2022 for violating the league's personal conduct policy. And that was for sexual assault as defined by the NFL on massage therapists. This is a shorter suspension, 1 week fewer, could end up being 10 games, but 1 week fewer. Obviously, these accusations were of sexual misconduct, not of sexual assault.
Yeah, just to kind of go back and look at what the actual letter of the law is for these more severe violations of the personal conduct policy: criminal assault or battery, domestic violence, dating violence, child abuse, other forms of family violence, sexual assault involving physical force, or committed against someone incapable of giving consent. Among your criteria for these 6-game plus suspensions. So for Justin Tucker to qualify for that kind of suspension under the NFL's personal conduct policy, plus have another 4 games tacked on, just by the letter of the law, it suggests that there were aggravating factors in the NFL's wording that they considered and that they found in their investigation. Obviously, there's a possibility, a remote one, that perhaps Justin Tucker and his agent take their word back and they will actually appeal. They have to decide on that pretty quickly. I think it's about a 3 or 5 day turnaround for them to actually file appeal. If they do, then I guess there's a possibility that we have a kind of conclusion similar to the Deshaun Watson situation, where it gets taken to a arbitrator who makes a decision, and perhaps that ruling gets leaked, and all of the findings are disclosed in the same way that they were with the Deshaun Watson situation. But for right now, it seems like the NFL and Tucker and everyone involved is just happy to put this to bed, even though it's not a happy resolution for anyone involved in this. But again, 10 games is a lot of games in the NFL, even though you're not on a team, even though you're not making any money. The Ravens said, we're not going to pay you because of football decisions. And, he's not going to be at the league for at least until mid-November. At that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to another bit of news that was revealed by Pablo Torre. He's our Who's Got It Better Than award winner this week, Jonas. Pablo Torre is of the Pablo Torre Finds Out podcast, formerly of ESPN. He obtained a 61-page arbitration ruling in a collusion case between the NFL and the NFL Players Association earlier this week. And he went on with a podcast, revealed the document itself, broke down the contents of the document, and there were several items in there that related to the Baltimore Ravens as well as quarterback Lamar Jackson. Now, the ruling found back in January that the NFL Management Council, which polices the league's salary cap, along with Commissioner Roger Goodell, had, quote, encouraged the 32 NFL clubs to reduce guarantees in veterans' contracts at the March 22 annual owners meetings. But the arbitrator also found that the NFL teams ultimately did not join in a collusive agreement and dismissed the NFLPA's arbitration demand that team owners colluded to deny certain players guaranteed compensation. I would encourage you to read the full document as well as to read or listen to / watch the Pablo Torre Finds Out podcast, because it's fascinating stuff. As you said, Jonas, a lot of palace intrigue with that. But as it relates to Lamar Jackson, because here is the specific stuff that we are going to talk about today. What was revealed in that 61-page document, Jonas, was that during Lamar Jackson's contract negotiations with the Ravens in 2023, he requested a fully guaranteed contract multiple times. This is 1 year after Deshaun Watson received a fully guaranteed $230 million deal from Cleveland. You may recall Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti said about the Deshaun deal, quote, "It's like, damn, I wish they hadn't guaranteed that whole contract. I don't know that he should have been the first guy to get a fully guaranteed contract. To me, that's something that is groundbreaking, and it'll make negotiations harder with others," end quote. We also learned in this document that only a couple teams expressed interest in Lamar Jackson after the Ravens placed the franchise tag on him, despite the fact that he was a former MVP winner and was just 26 years old at the time. Also, we learned that Eric DaCosta, as they were still negotiating Lamar Jackson's contract extension while he was under the franchise tag, remember that contract extension was announced, agreed to on the day of the first round of the NFL draft. And in that document, it was revealed that Eric DaCosta was preparing for the 2023 NFL draft under the assumption that Lamar Jackson would no longer be playing for the Ravens, according to the ruling. Jonas, so much stuff in that, so much stuff relating to Lamar and the Ravens. It's especially pertinent now as Lamar Jackson is looking for another contract extension. What was your initial reaction to all of this?
I think it just confirmed a lot of what we had heard, but were unable to get confirmed. A lot of what we suspected about that long, unending, extremely drawn out process. The fact that one of the things you didn't even mention there was that DeMaurice Smith, the former executive director of the NFL Players Association, which is the players' union, had reached out to Lamar and was telling him basically to bunker down and be the guy who's going to push for fully guaranteed contracts. And I think that was probably driving a lot of Lamar's decision making, along with his own small circle, whoever was advising him there. Obviously, he doesn't have an agent; he relies on his mom and other people. But you kind of wonder about the sliding doors moments of all this. If Eric Costa hadn't made that last ditch contract offer right after Jalen Hurts got his deal, and what happens if the Ravens had been a week late in offering Lamar what he ended up basically getting? Is there a situation where they take Anthony Richardson and have him on the same roster as Lamar.
They would have had to trade up a lot. I think Anthony Richardson went 4th overall to the Colts. The guy that I was looking at, Jonas, I was looking back at the 2023 NFL draft and thinking who's in range. Obviously, they took Zay Flowers in the first round of that draft. They did not have a second round pick because of the Roquan Smith trade. They took Trenton Simpson in the 3rd round. Will Levis was the guy that was falling down draft boards on the first night of the NFL draft and had to sit through a painful night in the green room and was available to any team in round 2. With Will Levis had been a Baltimore Raven.
It would have been a lot of Mayo jokes, a lot of Mayo jokes. It was just kind of wild to see the dysfunction on pretty much all sides, from the NFLPA to the the NFL colluding, but not really to get this done. Another detail you didn't mention was Lamar saying that he was having phone troubles.
Yeah.
The microphone on his phone wasn't working, so he couldn't get in contact with Eric DeCosta. We know that Lamar has a bit of a reputation, not only with, I guess, front office officials, but with his teammates for sometimes being hard to reach. And apparently that also extended to the most important negotiations of his career.
Let's break that down real quickly, because I saw a comment as we are live on YouTube and X to discuss this. And please leave a comment, a like, a thumbs up. Write us a 5-star review, by the way, and I'll read it out here on the show. But I saw a comment from Nick that said, my phone mic is broken. Do you buy that statement from Lamar Jackson that his phone mic was broken? And 2, if that was true, he is a multimillionaire. Wouldn't you think he could easily get another phone with a working microphone pretty quickly and easily?
I think so. And if his phone mic wasn't working, then he probably could have reached out to what's his name, Francis, the one-time Lamar Jackson agent who was working on his behalf, but not really.
Yeah, the one that the NFL advised teams not to listen to because Ken Francis, because
fitness equipment, superstar Ken Francis,
because he's not an official agent. Yeah,
right. And that whole situation was just hilarious. I mean, that wasn't even mentioned at any point in the write up of that got leaked to Pablo. So I'm sure in like 10 or 20 years from now, there are going to be some tell-all books about what exactly happened during this whole situation. Again, for this to come together the way it did, like you said, on draft day, as spectacularly as it did, with record-breaking deal, them getting Zay Flowers, a guy who was from South Florida and Lamar Jackson would have liked. It really just goes to show how thin the margins were, how skin of the teeth this whole situation was for the Ravens. I know some Ravens fans and some NFL fans don't really care about what was disclosed in this because they figure it's all kind of business. It's all par for the course with how the NFL operates and how they do business. But it is just fascinating to see how all this kind of came together. And I guess good job by the Ravens and from Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta and everyone on down not to say anything too incriminating. Like there was no real smoking gun like you had for the Chargers owner texting the Cardinals owner about how the deal that they'd given Kyler Murray would ultimately help them with their own deal for Justin Herbert because it wasn't fully guaranteed.
Right.
The juiciest thing that we got were just the texts from Eric DeCosta to Lamar Jackson and all that kind of stuff. But it was fascinating to me as someone who had heard some of this stuff, but had never actually gotten it confirmed in such a material way.
Yeah, and I think they also, on the podcast itself, on the Pablo Torre Funds Out podcast, brought up some good points. I think when discussing kind of the dynamic between the league and the Players Association, I thought they were right to hammer the point that the league, the owners are always more willing to pull out the nuclear option. And when they're negotiating any kind of deals, they're always more willing to cancel games, to push games, and players want to play. Players need the money more than owners do. I know a lot of people say, well, this is millionaires fighting with billionaires anytime there is a dispute between players and the owners. But the players certainly want to play more than the owners want to see the games, and the players are the ones that are out there working, that are out there making the money. So I just think it's a fascinating look into how all of this kind of came together. And when it comes to where the Ravens go from here, I mean, right now it's fascinating because we're in the midst now of time when Lamar Jackson needs another extension. His cap number is going to be going up exorbitantly over the next couple of years. That is not particularly helpful. That would not help the Ravens. That would not be useful for them to have their quarterback under contract, taking up such a large portion of their salary cap. So they will likely have to extend him very soon. This is a different situation than the one that they faced 2 years ago when Lamar Jackson was coming off back-to-back injury-shortened seasons, had played 12 games in 2022, or sorry, 2021, then 12 games in 2022. Obviously had won an MVP, but less recently. And right now, Lamar is coming off an MVP season 2023 and what could have been, what should have been an MVP season 2024. He's a little bit older, but he's still only 28 years old. Will Lamar Jackson ask for a fully guaranteed contract again? And does this revelation, does this 61-page document coming out about the fact that the owners technically didn't collude, according to this arbitrator, but sure would like to keep fully guarantees down? Does that change his mindset in these negotiations at all?
I've tried to get into the mind of Lamar Jackson, and I've realized that is a futile exercise. I mean, obviously, we're talking about the salary cap events of 2022, 2023, but look at what's happened in recent years, and even someone as accomplished as Josh Allen, who I think we can all agree is a peer of Lamar in talents and sheer finance and what he would demand on the open market, did not really get anywhere close to fully guaranteed. Again, I don't know if that will be any kind of inducement for Lamar to go back to what he would be asking for. I mean, you're talking about a guy who, we both think should be a two-time defending NFL MVP, and we think the Ravens certainly have what it takes to go win a Super Bowl this year. And this franchise is so dependent on Lamar for so many things. I mean, uh, you know, I think when you think of everything that's happened to this franchise in the past 6 months, that's Justin Tucker situation. You think of them going out on a limb and taking Mike Green. I think people are fine with it because of what it means for the greater consequences of this, of the Super Bowl push.
Some
Like,
people, not everybody.
yeah, but like Lamar, based on what he means to this franchise and also what this franchise has gone through, is one of the NFL's greatest deodorants. You know what I mean? Like, you apply him wherever you need, and it doesn't really matter what stinky thing you've done because you've got Lamar Jackson coming back on your team in 2025 or 2026. So
He's even better than deodorant, though. He's like full on cologne because
yeah, he's like the old school Old Spice.
If
He
only
can turn you into a
if only Lamar had a unisex cologne that we could compare to the kind of effect he has on a franchise.
that's right. But you know, beyond his salary cap hit going from $43.5 million in 2025 to $74.5 million the next 2 years, that has the Ravens over a barrel. The fact that he has a no tag clause after 2027, which is the last year of his deal, means that the Ravens can't just keep throwing top of the market money after him to keep him. He has a full no trade clause, which I guess he could waive, but that's way down the road for when the situation becomes really, really untenable for both sides. So the more this drags on, the more leverage he gets, and I think he realizes that. He obviously declined to really go into any kind of detail about his contract when we asked him at the mandatory minicamp. We haven't really gotten a whole lot of whole lot of opportunities to talk to Eric DeCosta about where things stand. We should have asked at the end of the draft, but they kind of cut things short. And the next chance we'll get to talk to Eric DeCosta will be, I think, right before the start of the season. So maybe they have a deal done by then. Maybe they don't. If they don't, obviously we'll ask where things stand and just how complicated that makes everything. I mean, I keep coming back to my own memories of covering this in 2023 and just asking Eric at the combine while they were still going through. This was before I put his trade request out there. Like, how complicated does it make your overall, uh, Excel spreadsheet budget making without having this huge tent stone contract on the books? And he said, "Yeah, that's a big, big thing." And You think about how you're gonna how are you gonna make the Lamar deal work with Kyle Hamilton's looming contract that we all think is going to happen. How you think it's going to make it work with Tyler Linderbaum? Obviously, Zay Flowers becomes eligible for an extension after next year. So you are just kind of fumbling about in the dark until you've got this huge, what we assume will be another record-breaking deal done. It's not the ultimate deterrent. We've seen that the Ravens get deals done with Sean Bateman. We've seen them get deals done with other guys. But if he is going to be the guy who's taken up 15 to 20% of your cap, you wanna know how those dollars are spread around for each year and when those salary cap, effects kick in. So he is, if they I'm not sure how much activity is gonna occur over these next couple weeks. You would think that that would be a good opportunity for Lamar to come up to Baltimore, or Eric Costa go down to South Florida and try to hammer this out, because, it's just what else is there to do besides just focus on the most important part of your roster building efforts at this point?
Yeah, and I will say if I agree with Steve Bisciotti on one thing, it's that I also wish Deshaun Watson did not get a fully guaranteed contract. Not that I'm against fully guaranteed contracts in the NFL. I think that players should be able to get whatever they can get. However, for the first one, for the most massive one in NFL history, $230 million to go to Deshaun Watson is I just feel for anybody like Lamar who is in this situation, who is negotiating and trying to make the case that he deserves a fully guaranteed deal and having that as precedent because Deshaun Watson's deal did not work out because he's not a good quarterback and not a good person. And Lamar, it should have gone to somebody who deserves that kind of contract. And if that deal had never been done and Lamar Jackson is able to successfully negotiate the first ever $230 million fully guaranteed contract, he would have fulfilled the promises in that contract and then some. He has been everything that they have asked him to be and more. And aside from the fact that he's missed some games here and there over the season, over his career, he has been a sparkling, shining, member of this organization in so many ways. And so it's frustrating that Deshaun got that deal. And look, Lamar should be able to get whatever he can get from a team. It's just a brutal situation now, and all of this information coming to light at this time, I just wonder if it could throw a wrench into any kind of negotiations, and whether Lamar is emboldened by this and sees that what NFL teams are doing, sees what his own team was doing, and is now going to be more demanding of a deal that guarantees him more money.
Yeah, and a lot has changed since 2023 when he did sign that huge record-breaking extension. We have new NFLPA leadership. Lloyd Howe, has replaced DeMaurice Smith, and we'll see. I don't know what kind of relationship they have, or the NFLPA and Lloyd Howe have with Lamar. Obviously, that seemed like was a driver of what Lamar was asking for initially. And then as far as kind of what have you done for me lately, Lamar's been healthy these past 2 years. That was the thing that hung over the previous contract deliberations was, you have in the leaked document, you have the Falcons owner saying that
Blank, yeah.
we didn't feel comfortable pursuing him because of his playing style and his injury history. And you have, even Eric Costa acknowledging, I think, somewhere in there that his playing style was a little bit of a deterrent, even though he loved the player, even though he loved the person, that was going to be a bit of an obstacle in giving Lamar what he wanted. So, I don't know if like the NFL and the NBA will ever come at reach a convergence point where what is guaranteed in the NBA becomes guaranteed in the NFL because of the nature of football, and the lifespans of these guys playing wise are so much shorter. But, Lamar has a bunch of decisions to make. Do you want to push for that? Do you want to uh, take the Tom Brady approach where you're giving the team a somewhat team friendly option so that you can continue to build a stronger team around you? I'm not suggesting that Lamar should take less money to help the team, because ultimately it is the team's prerogative. It is the team's responsibility to build a Super Bowl contender around the quarterback, not the other way around. But certainly it worked for Tom Brady, and Lamar, we all know, has worshipped and idolized Tom Brady. I don't know what he thinks of his business practices with giving team friendly deals to the Patriots and to the Crafts and everything like that. But these are the kind of considerations that Lamar's going to make whenever he comes back to the negotiating table with Eric DeCosta and the Ravens brass.
Yeah, and not to relitigate the point from 2 years ago about very few teams, according to this 61-page document, only quote a couple teams
and none after they put the tag on.
Yeah, being interested in Lamar Jackson's services, and they put the franchise tag on him, which means that any team would have to give up multiple first round picks in order to get him, as well as to sign him. And I know that they would have to wait 5 days at most for the Ravens to either match a deal that they have offered Lamar Jackson. That's 5 days of that kind of money sitting on your salary cap, because you have to have that money put aside, I guess you could say. So that is taking up a large chunk. And I know that there was also the thinking that, well, the Ravens are going to match no matter what. So if you make an offer, they're just going to match him and get him back. And if you make an offer, present a huge offer to Lamar Jackson, and the Ravens match it anyway, what does that say to whoever you have as your QB1 in the building, that you don't have faith in him and that you were trying to upgrade at the quarterback position? All that said, if you were a team that did not make an offer, did not even check in with Lamar Jackson before or after he was placed under the franchise tag, congratulations, you've played yourself. That is a superstar quarterback who is now a multiple-time MVP winner, who you did not even think to check in. Think about how many teams have changed quarterbacks, the Falcons included, in the last 2 years. I know this has been hammered to death. This is a horse that has been beaten repeatedly. However, you are well in over your head if you somehow convince yourself that not upgrading to Lamar Jackson was in the best interest of your franchise.
Yeah, and there are going to be plenty of good quarterbacks that come into the league over the next couple of years, but Lamar is already a Hall of Famer, we think, in terms of credentials. We put his playoff record aside. There aren't a lot of guys. I don't think there's anyone who has won 2 MVPs and should have won a third who's not in Canton already. We all think Lamar's there. You could argue that he's not even in his physical prime because of just what quarterbacks, how they kind of develop physically and mentally as well over their career. So I don't think I guess it's possible that we're looking at the final contract of Lamar's tenure here in Baltimore, but I think just based on how he's evolved and how he's progressed, being a guy who can kill you from outside the pocket, inside the pocket, kill you after the snap, before the snap. I think it's incumbent on the Ravens to get a deal done as soon as possible, just so we can get over asking these questions in the first place. But I guess I would say that if it happened once in terms of just this saga being a multi-year saga, we should for the possibility that it could happen again.
Yeah, I hate to think that, but you're exactly right. All right, one more topic that we have on our discussion board today, Jonas, and it's about DeAndre Hopkins. It's about the weapon that the Ravens added to Lamar Jackson's arsenal this offseason. And I was thinking about it because I was thinking, I tweeted out a clip of DeAndre Hopkins warming up at All Banner Sports on X, of him warming up during mandatory minicamp. And I asked the question, project DeAndre Hopkins' stat line. And then I thought back, where is DeAndre Hopkins going to fit in Ravens lore? Obviously, playoff success will have a large part of it. If they win the Super Bowl this year, DeAndre Hopkins will be lauded as one of the best, free agency pickups that Eric DeCosta and the Ravens have ever made. But just in terms of his personal stat line, we've seen the Ravens bring in a bevy of older, experienced, former Pro Bowl, former 1,000-yard guys, former first-round draft picks at wide receiver, to varying degrees of success. So I went back and I looked at guys that the Ravens have signed, wide receivers the Ravens have acquired that have had at least one Pro Bowl, or at least one 1,000-yard season, or at least been a former first-round pick. And there are a lot of guys that fit this category. And there are some winners and there are some losers on this list. I came up with a list of 13 guys. DeAndre Hopkins will be the 14th player on this list. Jonas, I am going to read out the names of these guys, and I'm going to give you their stat line in their first season with Baltimore. Sometimes they spent more than one, but their first season with Baltimore because DeAndre Hopkins signed a 1-year deal with the Ravens. And I want you to tell me whether Hopkins' final line with the Ravens in terms of catches and receiving yards and receiving touchdowns will be better or worse than the guy that I'm listing out. I'm going to go in chronological order. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. I know how excited you are for this exercise. Let's start with Derek Mason, 31 years old when the Ravens signed him in 2005. He was a Pro Bowler. He had a 1,000-yard receiving season before he joined the Ravens. His first season with the Ravens, he had 86 catches for 1,073 yards and 3 touchdowns. He would spend 6 seasons with the Ravens and total almost 6,000 yards. So his body of work certainly was massive and is the most of any guy on this list. Will DeAndre Hopkins' first season with the Ravens reach the heights that Derek Mason's did in his first year in Baltimore?
No, just because I think with how egalitarian this offense will be, I'm not sure if you can pencil anyone on this Ravens offense for a 1,000-yard receiving season.
Okay, so Derek Mason is you have Derek Mason over DeAndre Hopkins right now. Let's talk about Lee Evans, 30 years old when he signed with the Ravens in 2009. He was a former 1,000-yard receiver. 4 catches. Did I get this right? For 474 yards?
Yeah, an injury-shortened season, but obviously the thing that everyone remembers about him is just that last drop in the AFC Championship game where it cost the Ravens, especially because it's followed up by Billy Cundiff missing that kick, which lets the Patriots go to the Super Bowl. And
Sorry, there was a straight 4 in there. 4 catches for 74 yards, not 474 yards. Yeah, sorry. 4 catches for 74 yards and 0 touchdowns. Sorry, I cut you off mid-story, Jonas.
Yeah, just he did not have a good year, and he had an even worse playoffs. So I think the bar there is pretty low, and DeAndre Hopkins, assuming good health, should pretty easily clear it, I think.
Okay, Anquan Boldin, 30 years old when he signed with the Ravens, Pro Bowler, former 1,000-yard receiver. His first year with the Ravens in 2010, 64 catches for 837 yards, 7 touchdowns in 16 games, would spend 3 seasons with the Ravens, would win Super Bowl 47. Will DeAndre Hopkins have a better year than Anquan Boldin's 2010 season?
I think also, no, I think, are we setting the over-under for receiving yards for DeAndre Hopkins at like 650?
650. Okay.
I don't know.
That's going to guide how we go through this exercise. This very stupid exercise.
What do you think it would be?
That's what I'm asking you, Jonas. I have no idea.
I think it would, in statistical production aside, it would take a lot for DeAndre Hopkins to become as beloved, as much of a cult figure as Anquan has become in Baltimore. You know, Ravens fans are still pissed off about the fact the Ravens traded him when they were still kind of in the Super Bowl window, and certainly what he contributed to the Ravens during the Super Bowl run, and just being the guy who produced in a lot of the same ways as DeAndre Hopkins is expected to, a contested catch guy, great teammate, all that stuff. But I think, again, Anquan was one of the top options on that offense, with Joe Flacco. DeAndre Hopkins will not expect it to be.
TJ Houshmandzadeh, 33 years old when the Ravens signed him, also in 2010, 30 catches for 398 yards and 3 touchdowns in 16 games. He was a Pro Bowler. He was a 1,000-yard receiver. Of the 2 wide receivers they brought in that offseason, Anquan Boldin was the winner. TJ Houshmandzadeh, not so much. Will Hopkins surpass his production?
He definitely should.
Okay. So we are now through 4 wide receivers. Let's keep going because this is like pulling teeth for him. Steve Smith, Sr., signed by the Ravens at age 35, former Pro Bowler, former 1,000-yard receiver, signed a 3-year deal with the Ravens, which is wild to think about that a wide receiver who was 35 years old signed a 3-year deal, but ended up working out. His 2014 season with the Ravens, 79 catches for 1,065 yards, 6 touchdowns in 16 games, finished with more than 2,500 receiving yards for the Ravens in 3 seasons. This was Steve Smith's last NFL team. Jonas, will DeAndre Hopkins be Steve Smith Sr. 2.0?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. Mike, very quick answer. Thanks. Mike Wallace, another Ravens great. 31 years old, former Pro Bowler, former 1,000-yard receiver, had 72 catches for 1,017 yards and 4 touchdowns in 16 games. And then the Ravens picked up his team option in 2017, had 52 catches for 748 yards in 15 games. Will DeAndre Hopkins be better than Mike Wallace in Mike Wallace's first year with the Ravens? A take the top off the defense kind of speed threat.
Again,
Different wide receiver than DeAndre Hopkins.
He might have a year like the 2017 year where he went for 750 yards, but again, Mike Wallace was the downfield threat. When I looked at the DeAndre Hopkins film from 2023, where he did go over with 1,000 receiving yards, it was interesting just to watch his explosive plays. Like there are nice double moves, there are a couple nice catches and run, but there are also just him being the guy who I think Will Levis was entrusted to go out and make some contested catches, some jump balls, and Lamar when he's throwing deep down the field is not really the type to kind of throw guys open. He throws them open, but he doesn't. If he sees you running step for step with a cornerback who's just as big as you, he's not really inclined to make those kind of throws. That's why he's been so productive and prolific over the middle of the field. So I guess it depends on where DeAndre Hopkins is physically. He wasn't really a downfield threat last year for either the Titans or for the Chiefs. We have a couple catches of like 20-plus air yards. Based on how he's running now and based on where he might fit as an outside receiver in this offense and based on what we saw from Lamar last year, improving his downfield accuracy, maybe we see him become more of an explosive guy downfield because you just have to have such respect for him over the short and intermediate areas of the field. But again, we all think that DeAndre is probably getting close to the last legs of his career. So I think him becoming a guy who paces to 850 yards a season probably is pretty unrealistic.
Speaking of the guys who are on the last legs of their career, Jeremy Maclin signed at 29, former 1,000-yard receiver, former first-round pick. 2017 for the Ravens, 40 catches for 440 yards in 12 games. That was his last NFL team. Feel like D-Hop's got to pass Jeremy Maclin, right?
Yeah, it wasn't very, very productive.
Michael Crabtree also on this list, 1,000-yard receiver, former first-rounder, 2018 for the Ravens, 607 yards for 3 touchdowns in 16 games. I think we're right around where D-Hop would fit in with Michael Crabtree, right?
Yeah, I don't think Crabtree was particularly efficient. I think that was a pretty brutal offense for the most part. That was the year that Lamar obviously took over at the midseason / two-thirds mark. That was a team that was very much carried by its defense. So I don't think that was a particularly eye-popping 600 yards. Maybe it wouldn't surprise us if D-Hop gets to that level of production, but you'd hope that it would be more efficient than what I remember of that Crabtree season.
Also hope it'd be more efficient than Dez Bryant's 6 catches for 47 yards in the 2020 season with 2 touchdowns in 6 games. That was his last NFL team. Got to believe that D-Hop will pass Dez Bryant, right?
Yeah, I don't think he'll be tweeting about the offensive coordinator as much as Dez Bryant did about Greg Roman either.
Let's hope not. DeSean Jackson, 36 years old, former Pro Bowler, former 1,000-yard receiver, 2022, 9 catches for 153 yards, did not have a touchdown. That was his last NFL game, and now he is coaching for Norfolk State. Where's he?
Delaware State?
Delaware State? Something like that. I don't know. He's their head coach, though. Good for him. D-Hop should be better than DeSean Jackson. Sammy Watkins, former first-round pick, former 1,000-yard receiver, 29 years old when the Ravens claimed him off waivers in 2022. 3 catches for 119 yards. That was his last NFL team. D-Hop better. D-Hop clears. Nelson Aguilar, 2 more guys on this list. Nelson Aguilar, 31, former first-rounder, had 35 catches for 381 yards, 4 touchdowns, 17 games. Ravens then re-signed him for another season. Obviously more of a blocking wide receiver, not necessarily known for his catching prolificness. Anyway, it's late in the day. While in Baltimore, I think he is still unsigned at this moment, correct?
Yeah.
So this could be his last NFL team. Will D-Hop be a more productive wide receiver than Nelson Aguilar?
You would hope so. I think that some of those metrics are probably depressed by just how run heavy the Ravens were. I think Nelson did a good job for in terms of what he was asked for. I guess as far as the comp to D-Hop, seeing him in person, DeAndre Hopkins in person, it was a little bit surprising just how kind of thin he was. Like you'd expect him to be a little bit bulkier.
Yeah, you turned to me after his first in-person press conference, and you said, "Didn't you expect him to be a little thicker?"
Yeah, just as a contested catch guy. And I bring that up just because Aguilar was he wasn't as big as DK Metcalf, but I think he had a certain his body was filled out, and I think that's what made him useful as a blocker. And you would hope that when the Ravens get into these condensed sets, that DeAndre Hopkins could do that at a better level than say Flowers, who's obviously pretty small in frame, or Rashad Bateman, who is again more wiry than DeAndre Hopkins is. So if the Ravens could get a Nelson Aguilar level blocker, and uh, whoever it's going to be level receiver, then I think that would be a that would be good bang for the buck.
Did you ever shake Nelson Aguilar's hand?
Can't say I did.
I did, and engulfed my hand. Yeah. I mean, he's a wide receiver, so he should be. But
DeAndre Hopkins has even bigger hands.
Yeah, you were doing some deep diving on DeAndre Hopkins' hands. What did you learn about that?
Just there's a webbing in terms of how he's.
It's like Michael Phelps, the webbing between his fingers.
The size of his palm is bigger than normal just because of how the hand is built. There was a good story from Robert Mays on the Ringer about just the size of it and how it's a little bit different than the normal, which has explained why he's been so gifted and productive in terms of making all these incredible catches. He just has a bigger frame. But again, hand size really doesn't determine a whole lot for these receivers. I always think back to the incredible catches that George Pickens has made over his career, and even in Steelers training camp. And I think you look at his mock draftable spider chart, and it's like 5% hand size. So
the Steelers love their guys with small hands, don't they?
It would help to have big hands, whether you're a quarterback or wide receiver, but it's not going to decide whether you're capable of making these incredible catches.
All right. Last but not least, OBJ, 31 years old when the Ravens signed him for $15 million in 2023. Obviously checks all three boxes. Had 35 catches, same amount as Nelson Aguilar in 2023 for 565 yards or more. Efficient for 3 touchdowns and 14 games. Jonas, this is a tough one. OBJ or D-Hop? OBJ in 2023 or D-Hop in 2025?
I think OBJ could have had more production. Like he was. I remember when I was doing the story on Rashad Bateman after that 2023 season, where there was that misconnection there with him and Lamar. Like Odell was the victim of some off-target throws, one of the highest off-target rates downfield. Again, put some of that blame on Odell's feet, some of that on Lamar's. So I think I would be fine if the Ravens got a Odell level production for D-Hop. I think DeAndre Hopkins will probably deal with some injury stuff because it's accumulated over his career, and he dealt with a knee injury last year, and even though he's healthy this year, and will probably not have to carry as big a load as he did in Tennessee or in Kansas City. He should be healthy, but again, I think that the guys who've been through the ringer, like Odell, like DeAndre Hopkins, will probably not be expected to be able to put in a full 17-game shift. So I think I'm probably expecting DeAndre Hopkins to have a better year than Odell, but barely. But again, if this is the 50th percentile outcome for all the possible D-Hop seasons, it would surprise me.
All right. So guys on this list now, you have put D-Hop behind Derek Mason, Anquan Bolden, Steve Smith Sr., Mike Wallace. And that's it. D-Hop would be 5th on this list of 14. So you're expecting him to have about right around 650 yards, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to see what the over-unders are for some of these guys. It's probably hard to find those right away based on how far we are from the season. But as we get closer, maybe we can take a closer look to what DraftKings and FanDuel and those guys are offering in terms of props for the over-under. Because again, you have a dominant rushing offense, you have a defense that last year gave the offense a lot of opportunities to pump the ball downfield and not just run out the clock because of how competitive some of those games were. But you've got best tight end room, you've got one of the best running back rooms, you've got Lamar taking things in his control, you've got Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman still being ascendant, and then Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell coming out of the backfield. There's just so many mouths to feed, and we don't know exactly where that's going to leave D-Hop.
Yep. All right. We are almost done here, but Jonas got to pour one out for my favorite segment, Jonas's least favorite segment on this show, which is Word of the Day. because somebody on this podcast never put in the time required to make that segment the best that it could be. Do you take full responsibility, Jonas?
I blame the English language. There are only so many words for.
You would always, for longtime listeners of this podcast, Jonas would always hate to do the word of the day segment, come up with a terrible word, and then midway through the podcast, drop some word that is buried in the dictionary that
I know,
nobody's
'cause
ever heard.
It wouldn't be thematically resonant.
Thematically resonant. Like this is the kind of stuff that he says in everyday life, but then hates the segment that I've created for him.
I mean, I'm not gonna say I don't know. I can't think of a fancy word right now. Like I can't. I'm not gonna pull something out of my butt just to be highfalutin about it. And
Highfalutin. There it is. Like, that's exactly. That is the most ironic sentence.
Why
you've
would
ever
that be
said.
the word of the day? Is my point.
Because it's an outstanding word and you're engaging with the audience. This is just my chicanery. There we go. There's a word I wanted you to say.
I think you're playing dumb.
This show is just my chicanery and Jonas's attempt to quell my chicanery. Former word of the day, quell. It's sad. We're gonna have to come up with something else though, Jonas. We're getting rid of word of the day.
We have who's got it better than.
Do you like that segment? Sure. That's the nicest thing he's ever said
You
about
want me
me.
to say indubitably just so you can continue to mock me?
Precisely. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let us know what you think our next segment should be. And by the way, if you want to read more about the NFL and NFLPA's collusion case, Kyle Goon of the Baltimore Banner wrote a great column where you can read it on BaltimoreBanner.com. $1 for 6 months. Read all of Jonas's great work and Gianna Hahn's work as well. We have complete coverage of the breaking news from today, which is Justin Tucker has been suspended for the first 10 weeks of the regular season. And we have plenty more as the Ravens inch closer to training camp, which won't begin for about another month. Thanks so much for tuning in. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. We will keep you going with updates, with episodes up until the start of training camp. It is no off season for us. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. We'll catch you next time.